not here to hear about liquor, but there's a lot of parallels to what's happening in cannabis. You know, as we see, the states are leading it, right? The federal government is not. It's still prohibited at the federal level. It's still a Schedule 1 drug, which never should have been. It made no sense. It never warranted that. And there's a lot of history around it, but it still is today. And so you've got this weird moment in time where the federal government says it's not allowed, it's illegal. And the states have said, no, in our state, we're going to do it. So you now have all these states that have permitted, and I think we're up to, I don't know, 35 or so that have permitted some form of cannabis, maybe even more now. 5 states were on the ballot this past November. They all passed. And it's red state, blue state, purple state, doesn't matter. You know, Arizona passed, Jersey passed, Mississippi passed a medical cannabis bill. So go figure. So, you know, you've got a movement that is supported now by majorities of the public, whether you're liberal, conservative, veteran, older, younger. If you look at every segment in the recent Gallup's polls, there's a majority of every one of those groups in favor of some form of cannabis legalization. So I'm living kind of in Prohibition Repeal 2.0. Where 1.0 is 1933 and 2.0 is 2020. And it's happening in stutter steps at state level. But that's also how prohibition rolled out, right? So when they gave the states the rights, there were states like Kansas and others that didn't permit alcohol for another couple decades, right? And there's still counties within a state that don't permit it. I think the county where Jack Daniels is made is still dry, I believe. So it's still a quirky business. That's a quirky business. This will be a quirky business, but it feels natural to me. And so when I got into the cannabis space, you know, people said, "Oh, you're not going to believe all the rules." I'm like, really? You know where I've been living for a long time? Because we had a lot of rules too. So the whole state and federal regulatory framework felt pretty normal to me. And building brands in that context is really what we're doing. So. Anyway, it brings it full circle. I think I couldn't think of a better experience set and background than where I've come from to bring to this new industry. And there's certainly differences, but there's enough things in parallel that are kind of progressing. So what I thought I would do today is give you guys a little bit of a kind of strategic high level view of kind of what's happening, and how I see convergence happening, which, you know, I don't know if we gave a title for the speech, but you know, kind of CPG, big pharma, big drink, big alcohol, everybody's about to come. And I'll kind of give you a snapshot of where things stand right now. And I'll also tell you a little bit about us, but I don't want it to be a vertical wellness, you know, commercial or anything. So I'll just give you a few things about what we're doing, how we're, mainly to illustrate how we're trying to take advantage or navigate the landscape that I'll describe. So before I do that, I'm going to play a short clip just to give you a flavor for how we're talking about the business and add a little excitement to the intro. So here we go. Wait, I have to screen share, don't I?
Can you do it?
Yeah, I think I can. All right, let's see. All right. All right, can you guys see my blank thing there? All right, let me know if you, give me a thumbs up if you hear volume when I play it. If you don't, I'll fix it.
Fast Money starts right now, live from the NASDAQ market site overlooking New York's Times Square. I'm Scott Wapner. Let's bring in a man who was born to work in this industry, Smoke Wallin.
Right now, we're building our business, and we're focused on executing our plan. And this is the biggest growth opportunity of any category I can remember in my lifetime. And I'll go back to Prohibition.
Plans to go public and list its shares on the NASDAQ. Smoke Wallin is with us. He's the president and CEO. Back in the 90s, you were at Seagram's, the liquor business.
Yes.
I'm so grateful for this industry, and it was an honor to be named by UCLA as one of the top 10 health advocates for women in the country.
We're working very hard in a bipartisan way to either get the FDA or the Congress to act.
There is a relatively new cash crop that has some seeing green and Wall Street eyeing a potential new wave of profits. Frank Holland is in Murray, Kentucky for us.
hemp production has more than doubled since Congress legalized the crop last December. As much as $32 billion worth of cannabidiol, or CBD, could be sourced from the hemp at this farm in Murray, Kentucky, and others around the country.
We're growing hemp, we're harvesting it, we're extracting the CBD, and then we're putting it into our brands.
Smoke Wallin is the CEO of Vertical Wellness, a company focused on CBD products manufactured from industrial hemp.
All right, that's the smoke commercial. You're done with that, but give you a flavor for kind of the excitement around the space. And it was really cool, Eric, when I was doing Fast Money, Dina came and watched the show and hung out after. So she's, as you guys probably know, is one of our classmates, which was pretty cool.
That's
so
awesome.
Yeah, and the reason, we're pretty early stage company, but I think that this is going to require a tremendous amount of capital. And we're going to need currency to do acquisitions. We're going to need to invest quite a bit in R&D because there's a whole health and wellness aspect to this plant that is extremely important, I think, to where we go with it as an industry. And so, we're laying the groundwork to be a public company probably earlier than you would have normally, but also because I believe that the market will give us credit for it. We'll be able to, have access to a lot of capital and have a currency that we can make acquisitions. So that's really just our strategy. It's not about really a liquidity or exit or anything. It's really about a vehicle to, to really achieve our strategic goals. So I'm going to throw a couple slides up, and again, I don't want to spend too much time on slides. So I think would it be more interesting to have like Q&A, I would guess, but let me just show you a couple things just to give
us a little context first.
Right, I'll give you a little context to do that. All right, so I'm going to share the screen again. This time it's going to be this one. Okay. All right, can you guys see that okay? All right, can you see the slides that work? All right. And I'm happy to share some of these slides if you guys want to see it later. I just grabbed some data. What I said before, the market is opening up dramatically. Interestingly enough, when this product, cannabis in general, gets on the ballot, it wins. There's almost been no exceptions in the last number of years. Where it gets stopped up is in the legislatures, and because the big pharma guys, the number one characteristic of this plant is it fights inflammation. We're finding lots of uses of it, helping sleep, helping with pain relief, helping with anxiety, many of which you can't make a lot of health claims, but anecdotally, there's tremendous amount of body of evidence and more scientific evidence validating it. So if you have a multi-billion-dollar drug in the pharma business that helps with pain, sleep, or anxiety, you could name a bunch of them. The last thing you want is a natural solution, a plant that actually solves it. And so the natural opposition has been the pharma world, and they won't talk about it on TV, but when you go to the legislature, that's where they're fighting it, and they're really better organized and have a lot more money. But they're all going to be in it at some point. They're just trying to delay the inevitable. The market's big, it's getting bigger. The market for CBD is big, it's getting bigger. There's lots of ups and downs along the way. I won't spend a lot of time on that. The market has been up and down. There's been a lot of value created, a lot of value destroyed. It's kind of on a resurgent now. We're seeing separation. The companies, the multi-state operators in the US who are producing cash are gaining traction and started to separate from the rest of the pack. And you're starting to see some of these, there's a long tail of little companies that went public in Canada that really aren't producing cash, and they're being pummeled in the market. I'm not going to talk about this. So here's how I look at the business. I see the global wellness economy at something like $4.5 trillion. And you could argue with these classifications, but I think we can all agree it's big, it's significant, and there's lots of pieces to it. There's a wellness tourism piece. There's a personal care and beauty that ties in with anti-aging. There's the whole spa world, nutritional weight loss, kind of better for you kind of products. you know, there's a whole bunch of categories. And notice, like, not one of these I have in here is getting high. You know, so I do think that THC has a role. The social aspect is certainly real and big. And if I were to compare it to alcohol, I would say, you know, beer, wine, and spirits together is about a $260 billion business in the US at retail, at consumer spend. And I would say, you know, so each category, little differences, you know, beer's a little bit bigger, spirits is in the middle. So spirits is like 90 billion, wine is maybe like 60 billion. I would say that cannabis, the party aspect can be equal to any one of those categories. So wine, beer, spirits, I think the recreational side can be as big as beer, wine, or spirits. I believe that the health and wellness side is bigger than all of it. So that's why I have this slide. It's really, I think, we're just scratching the surface. And we spent a lot of time talking about CBD and THC, but there's 150 or so cannabinoids in the plant, and we're barely scratching the surface on what they all do. We're just learning more and more about it. So where do I see value being created? And this is from the great research hall of Smoke Wallin's computer. So I made this. So like what I'm saying here is, my view is, at the end of the day, growing, you know, there's pockets where you can make a lot of money, but it's going to commoditize. It's a plant. Same with hemp processing. There's service providers that can make money. I think the retailers as a whole, you know, it's retail. There's regulated markets where they have semi-monopoly licenses and they're making pretty good money, but I don't think that's going to be a long-term status. I think pharma is a real category, and all the drugs around this plant and what comes out of it. But the big enchilada, in my view, is brands and distribution, which is why that's what I'm focused on. And if I looked at the supply chain, kind of another slice of it, and this is kind of representative. It's more of an illustrative supply chain because it's no one really knows everything in it yet. But you know, I see brands, the profit pool in the brand side being the biggest opportunity. So I'm going to show you one other slide. I'm going to just to kind of give you a flavor. If you were going to look at the supply chain from cultivation, processing, product development, branding, distribution, retail, where although we're touching a lot of these, I'm really focused on the brand side. And this is our plant in Katie's. When we all distributed vaccines, and you guys want to take a tour in the spring, you're all welcome to come visit. It's only an hour and 15 minutes away from the school. And those bales are like 2,000-pound bales of hemp, all those white bales out in the yard. And we're drying them and processing them. We're probably the largest processor in the country this year. I have 18 million pounds of third-party hemp I'm processing, and another 4 million pounds that we grew. All of that material goes into different form factors. When I say form factors, I mean everything from flower to pet products to wellness products to topicals, edibles, beverages. There's all kinds of different categories. So those are form factors in our world. And then what we're doing is creating a portfolio of brands that can stand up well in those different categories and form factors and have reason to be in and of themselves. And people say, well, why do you have so many brands? Okay. Well, if I gave something to my dog, am I going to put that on my injury? Probably not. Am I going to put something on my injury, on my swollen knee, and also drink it? Probably not. Like, is it going to be what I put on my face for my anti-aging, you know, beauty? No, like there's segments that should be separate. And the only brands that work where the same brand is in everything is like Weight Watchers and Kirkland, you know, generic store brands or like very specific categories, GNC maybe. But, you know, and I think there's a big mistake that most of the companies have made. They've branded their company and their brand CBD. That's an ingredient. You notice, do I call these brands CBD? Almost none of them have even the word CBD in them, but because they're brands that happen to be using the plant to create an effect that we want. And this is what, you know, we have some really cool stuff coming. So I'm going to stop the slides, we have a whole beverage portfolio, and just talk to you guys about, just like open it up for conversation. we're going mainstream with all the CBD products. We're going with mainstream distributors across the country, and we're pretty excited about that. And this is what we're creating. So the next great CPG company, Vertical Wellness. Did I shorten my deck long enough? Like that's enough slides, right? Like, okay.
That's great. That's great. So questions for Smoke. I got one, and then so what's the biggest friction to growth for your company?
Well, the regulatory hurdles, I guess, are both the biggest hurdle, and also the big opportunity. And what I mean by that is the most natural product line extension I could think of would be Gatorade with CBD. But PepsiCo is not going to do that. Like they're the least risk, they're the most risk averse, that ilk of people, right? And you know those guys pretty well. But like that kind of company, they're not risk takers. Like they're going to wait until everything is all tied up in a bow, and then they're going to buy people up and stuff. But they're not going to go risk Gatorade franchise. And by the way, if the first bottling run of Gatorade with CBD would use up all the CBD in the world, I'd be able to sell all that CBD from those bales that you see and actually make some money. It'd be really nice. But they're not going to do that. And the reason they're not going to do it is there's too much uncertainty. The FDA has so far not permitted ingestibles. So that's food and beverage, things you take into your mouth. And there's a whole reason for that. I can talk about it if you want, but they haven't permitted that yet. We're fighting that. The DEA is still, butting into it because THC is still a Schedule I drug, even though it shouldn't be. They classify it the same way. Hey, they do heroin and cocaine and whatever else. And in the process of processing hemp, which is federally now legal, right? It was part of the Farm Bill in 2018. To grow it and call it hemp, it's cannabis. It's all the same plant. But the hemp version to be called hemp has to have less than 0.3% THC. So we're buying seeds that are most likely going to have low THC. Then they're checking it. The ag departments in the states are checking it. So then I harvest it. It has 0.3% or less THC. But when I extract it, I dry it, and then I pull the cannabinoids out of the plant, and I'm trying to concentrate the CBD. So I'm pulling it out using ethanol or CO2, or there's different ways to do it. And when I do that, I take the CBD level from like somewhere between, call it 7 to 10% to 60% in one step in extraction, and then up to 90+% in kind of a distillation step. And when I do that, I also increase the percentage of other cannabinoids. So if THC is 0.3%, it's just math. And I brought the other ones up, it's going to go now up. It might get up to 2% or 1%. Now that's not going to get anyone high, but it's illegal. And so all these things like these, it just creates uncertainty. And so what that does is it keeps institutional capital out, and it keeps a lot of the big CPG guys out. So that's the good part. The bad part is I'm trying to raise a lot of capital, and I'm dealing with these same issues, right? I'm trying to navigate when I can do it. Walmart doesn't want to carry stuff until they know it's safe. And, there's all this back and forth. So that's the biggest hurdle, but it's also, I look at it as, if it weren't unclear, everybody would jump into it, and it's better for me to live with the uncertainty.
That's great. Questions for Smoke?
I know this is not a shy group, so.
Sure. I'd love to, first of all, what are you doing with 18 million pounds of, I guess that's the biomass weight right now? Yeah.
So, this is a little side story, but the industry has, when the Farm Bill passed, I had already invested in Kentucky. I did 115 acres, and we were trying to figure out how to process and buy equipment and everything else. And things were going, like everything went wrong. The seeds were bad. The weather was bad. The building I got didn't work. The equipment wasn't working. So everything was going wrong, which, by the way, anyone that speaks to you guys and doesn't tell you about all the bad things, they're not really being honest about stuff. Like things go wrong, and especially in a startup, and especially in a startup in a new industry. So we're building everything from the ground up. So we were there, the Farm Bill passed, and we and a lot of people, Alice, jumped in and decided, hey, this is the next giant, leap forward for the industry. I grew 1,800 acres, which ended up producing 4 million pounds of wet hemp. Others grew millions of pounds of hemp all over the country, and a lot in Kentucky, in this area. And then the bottom fell out, kind of as harvest came in October, the bottom fell out of pricing. I thought I had $400 million worth of CBD I was growing. I literally have presentations that are on the internet. I can't get rid of them because it's like investor conferences where I said that CBD is probably worth $30-40 million today. But we all thought we had like this massive thing, and like, wow, okay. So 7 of the largest processors of hemp, who raised over $400 million last year, went belly up, went bankrupt in one form or another. And so coming around the end of the year, I was like, okay, this is getting tough, this end of last year. And so I cut my costs. I laid off like 50 people, got really lean, because I was like, this capital markets are going to be tough. I don't know how to sell all this material. And then COVID hit, and I was like, okay, now things are worse. And so things were really bad before COVID, if you can imagine that. Like this was a distressed industry. And I actually called some of the bankers who I was dealing with, and I was like, is there any way I could help some of these bankruptcies, recover value for the creditors or for the investors? And we ended up getting into some of the bankruptcies, and I ended up with contracts for 18 million pounds for other people's hemp. Thank God, not mine, but other people's hemp that we are processing for a service fee to help them salvage value. So 18 million pounds from them, 4 million of mine. So 22 million pounds this year. I don't think anybody's anywhere near that. If you came to me and said, hey, Smoke, let's put a business plan to be a giant dryer and processor of hemp, I would have said, Alice, find another partner, good luck, I wish you well. I would never have done it. But it's a great example of like, I'm a brand company, I'm a brand guy, but like, this is a way to survive. And we pivoted, we got this contract, these different contracts, and it turned us profitable in Q2, Q3, Q4. Like, we've started making money during the pandemic while I couldn't even launch brands yet. So that bought me time to get the brands ready to launch. So just another, day in the office for me.
So how would you describe, I'm sorry, go ahead. Somebody else wanted to say something. Well, how would you describe the marketplaces for biomass and CBD oil right now in terms of their efficiency?
Well, they're highly distressed. There's a lot of, like I said, a lot of people grew in 2019. So there was a tremendous amount of material that came on the market, and the processing wasn't in place. The retailers who I thought Walmart and Target were all going to bring it in right away, and because they're all looking for growth too. But with the FDA coming out with their ingestible ruling, everybody kind of tapped the brakes. And so it just backed up the whole system. So a lot of people lost a lot of money. A lot of farmers lost money. A lot of processors lost money. It's an ugly moment. So I don't know about efficiency. It's distressed. I know that. And by the way, never have I encountered anything in all my years in liquor, and there's lots of shady folks, I've dealt with in different cities and things, but nothing like this industry. It's a crazy, it attracts some really bizarre people. I had a meeting today with some folks, and they said the same thing. Like, it's few and far between to find people you can do business with that you can trust. And there's so many people that came out of like the illegal market that kind of moved into as it got legalized. And it's a tough crowd. I'll leave it. I'll be friendly and say it's a tough crowd. But they call people like me the suits, right? Like, really? Come on.
Hey, Smoke, this is Todd Easley. Nice to speak with you. I have a question for you. How did you manage to handle that level of increase in throughput? If you're doing 4 million pounds and you were able to step up and process another 4.5x that.
I did two things. I bought some additional equipment that we had a pretty big capacity dryer I'd already put in. I bought another one in parallel with getting the agreement. And then my biggest client had a giant drying system, and I negotiated to get their dryer for two reasons. One, so we had throughput to handle all this material, Todd, but also to get them out of the business. Because I'm like, if I'm going to be the dryer, I might as well get everyone else out of the drying business. And like I said, I wouldn't join I wouldn't be like a giant processor and dryer of hemp if I was starting from scratch. But I'm not. I'm in it, and I have a very large scale, low cost operation. We've done everything on a shoestring, but it's very effective. So I should be the low cost producer for drying and processing of hemp in, I would say, like a 600-mile radius of where we are in Kentucky, a day's truck drive. So when growing comes back, which this year was really light because everyone got burned last year, but I think growing will start to come back, and as the market develops, we'll have a nice little service business to help other people in the industry just process their hemp. Again, the value. So if I showed you guys my financial model, for those of you who think about this, if I value my brand business at, call it, 25 plus times easily, right, of future cash flow, I could easily get that kind of value in the marketplace, probably more in this space. My processing, ingredient, producing CBD business, I figure it's 8 to 10 times. So, we get a melded value for all the things we're doing. That wouldn't be a business I would try to get into, but hey, it's paying for a lot of brand development and keeping the lights on. So I like it.
Yeah, great short-term pivot and puts you in position to do something else future and takes out a competitor. That's nice.
Yeah, and that competitor is a customer, right? So I'm doing a service for them, and there's other ways that they can do stuff with us. So like, we're just trying to build an ecosystem. And I had a meeting today with a large family office here in Denver who, multi-million dollars, and they're trying to get into the space. And that's what we talked about is we need good actors to build an ecosystem. And I left the meeting saying, look, hey, if you guys want to get involved with what we're doing, great, let's do it. If we want to do something, a JV together, let's do it. If we don't even do any of that, let's just help each other whenever we can, because we need good actors building out an ecosystem. And, they loved it. And hopefully they're going to write a big check, but we'll see.
I'll go with one, Smoke. So I have a background in consumer goods, and the branding aspect is really interesting to me. But I'm sure, like most people, my little suburb here of Nashville seems to have a CBD shop on every corner, and it seems just like a very diffused market. So how do you kind of break through this incredible clutter with your branding?
Yeah, so it's a good question. There's lots of little CBD brands all over the place. I guess I'll liken it or bring it back to my creating my own brands in the alcohol space. That's an industry obviously with giant, powerful brand companies, Diageo and Bacardi and all these companies, and they control distribution and they control the outlets. And I joke, but I spent a lot of time in bars, not just drinking, Eric, for real. Like actually looking at the bar and trying to figure out what's the white space, what's the seam between the other brands that someone's missing. Like, how do I think about, between all the different whiskeys, like what's next, and what could I create that is differentiated, that I could get through distribution, that I get on the shelf, that I could actually fight my way through. And I'm dealing with the, deepest pocketed, I would argue, best marketers in the world who own that market. So I look at this space and the whole thing is white space. So yeah, there's a lot of little guys, but it's like I'm Gulliver, right? Like there's like I mean, I got all these like gazillions of little brands. Some of them are going to be great. Some of them are not. Most of them are not going to work. But, you know, if we get scale, we execute on our brands, we have distribution, we have capital, then I'll pick out, you know, the better ones and try to bring them under the platform. You know, we're a brand company, so it doesn't have to be invented here. I've already bought several brands, and, you know, but how do you differentiate? So that's just a philosophy going in. That didn't really answer your question. When I go talk to a retailer, I'm not there to sell them Wingward Farms or, you know, actually I brought show and tell. If you guys were here, we would do this together, but let's see. All right, so this is par 5. This is a 1,500 milligram CBD freeze roll on pain relief, and it's targeted at what's the hardest hole in golf? Everybody play golf here? So it's a focused brand. It's called Par 5 because it's the longest hole. It's the hardest one. And so it's products that help you with your back and your wrists and things like that. I'm not going into a Target or whatever and saying, hey, buy my Par 5. I'm going in and saying, here's all the places that consumers are showing interest in this category. So it's not one category. It's health and wellness. It's pet. It's, you know, beauty. So there's lifestyle. So there's all these different, there's beverage, there's a whole beverage thing that's coming. So there's all these different segments where consumers are showing a lot of interest and are natural, you know, logical ways of putting the product, you know, using the products. So, you know, how are you thinking about it for your store? So we go in with a portfolio approach and we say, like, look, you need to have representation in these different segments. Oh, by the way, I have brands in these segments, so we can service that. I'm not saying I should be the only brands, but we can work with you and really be your category captain and leader. And it's something I've done and did in other industries. And, you know, it's a whole different conversation than trying to sell somebody one SKU. And you know, the other way, even though we've taken a bath in the growing and extracting business in the beginning, there is some comfort level when I say I control the supply chain from seed all the way to the shelf. And with so many products that are, you know, proving not to be true or testing wrong, or there's CBD coming from other countries that, you know, no one wants to consume it, you know, to have a supply chain that we can track and trace throughout the system, I think is a nice selling point. At least, you know, I get something for my, I don't know how much I spent, but a lot on that stuff. But so that's a differentiator, because most of those brands you see in those little stores don't have a supply chain. They have somebody packing it for them. And, you know, it's, you know, building a brand is not easy. And people forget that, I think, today more than ever, but because they read about, you know, they read about Deep Eddy and, you know, selling for 400 million in 4 years, or, you know, Avion, you know, they read about these things, Casamigos, Aviation Gin with Ryan Reynolds selling for 600 million this summer. You know, but that's not really the reality. That's the exception. You know, most brands take a decade to build, and it's a lot of blocking and tackling. And, I see that as a big thing. The other thing is, how many of those guys have any science behind what they're doing? Like I bought one company this summer that has technology that is patented, is already issued patents, and it's a process patent, but it basically enables for the fast activation of cannabinoids. So if I put CBD in it, it goes into your bloodstream at a much faster rate. If it's a topical, it goes through the hair follicles. If you ingest it, it absorbs in your bloodstream before it gets to your liver. Because when it gets to your liver, it processes differently. And so you get higher bioavailability, and you get a faster acting cannabinoid. How many of those little brands that are in that little shop by your house have any science whatsoever? There's a couple guys in their garage saying, hey, let's make a CBD brand and put it on the shelf. You know, so I think there'll be differentiation on branding just like there is, you know, differentiation between vodkas and, you know, there's a Grey Goose and a Tito's and a whatnot, right? There'll be differentiation on branding, but there'll be a lot of differentiation on the science and delivery and efficacy of these products. How well do they work? Like I can give you a product with a lot less CBD in it and have it work more, have bigger impact than a higher CBD that's delivered wrong. So there's a lot of that. I think that'll help separate the pack, but for the meantime, there'll be a lot of clutter.
So do you also have your own team of scientists doing this bioavailability work?
I have some formulators who, I don't know if I'd call them scientists, but they have a lot of science background. We're also working with like Murray State on testing a lot of things. I went to Cornell undergrad, so I've got some projects I'm working on to get those guys engaged. It all got kind of slowed down a little bit with COVID because it's hard to you know, engage quite at the level we want to. But like Murray State's doing a lot with, like, we're testing. They're feeding chickens hemp, and they're spitting out or popping out or whatever you say, high omega-3 eggs. You know, a lot of the eggs, you know, they're injecting that after the fact to make them high omega-3. Hemp helps them produce naturally high omega-3 eggs. So there's a whole bunch of things like that we're learning, and we're doing our part. But honestly, like, that's why, you know, we're on a mission to get very highly capitalized so we have more money to invest in that stuff. Right now, it's a block. You know, we're in the game of like, let's get our products out and selling them.
Yeah.
Hi, Smoke. Nimi here, first year MBA. You mentioned that, thank you for your presentation. Thank you for sharing your experience with us. You mentioned that the plan does well on ballots, but things kind of break down once it gets to the point of regulation and things like that. How involved are you in, you know, lobbying to ensure that, first of all, this gets on ballots in different states across the country, and what does that involvement look like?
So I have a couple lobbyists I've paid. I've gone to Washington, as I mentioned. I have, you know, done some direct, you know, calls, but I've probably done more in terms of my part in helping the overall industry. I've done more in media than I have in lobbying. So, you know, talking to the press about the issue and trying to put it in bite-sized pieces that the public can get and the politicians might actually pick up on. But, you know, it's not unexpected. Like when I was chairman and president of the Wine and Spirits Wholesalers, that's the trade association that the distributors have in liquor. You know, you could imagine, but, you know, that's a very organized business. We've been at it for a long time. We had a, you know, $2 million pack. You know, that's hard dollars. Plus we had a lot of members who, you know, when we said, let's go to Washington and lobby for this bill we're working on, you know, I could have 100 owners of companies flying in from around the country, calling on their congressman, their senator, and arguing for their case. That's an organized industry. We don't have anything like that yet, right? The hemp and cannabis industry is so new, and a lot of it was missionary work in the prior years of people who were like marijuana people saying, dude, you gotta let us, you know, toke or whatever. Like it didn't resonate that well necessarily with the legislatures, right? So like when I went to Washington, people were like, why are you meeting with all the conservatives? Like, why are you meeting with those guys? I'm like, well, because they're the guys we have to convince. Like you're not gonna get anything done unless you get some bipartisan agreement on stuff. And the good news is where I was in the beginning of 18 to now is light years difference. I mean, there is a recognition on, I think, all sides of the aisle that you don't want to be against. This is a more popular topic than any politician on either side, right? Like they got more votes in New Jersey, more votes in Arizona than the politicians that were running. Like, you know, because it's attracting people from all sides. So I'm not a very, I'll be respectful and just say, like, I'm not a fan of the political world. You know, I've dealt with them long enough to know I don't really believe in many of them, if any of them. That said, like their job is to get reelected. And if your job is to get reelected, you got to pay attention to what people want. And this is something that, you know, I don't care who you are. This is, you don't want to be against this one. So Nimi, is that how I say your name?
Yes.
Nimi, I look at, I have a unique platform and the ability to kind of get that message out and speak, I think, in a way that, you know, kind of conveys that message to a large audience. So that's basically what I've been doing. And I'm trying to help the other guys get organized, but you know, it's like organizing a whole bunch of, I don't know, cats, or I don't know exactly what the analogy would be, but they're not very organized.
Makes sense. Thank you.
Sure. Come on, there's more questions.
Do you see the pharmaceutical companies? You mentioned that as kind of a, you know, a target area for you, but do you see some of the big pharmaceutical companies getting into this much like they did with CBD related to seizures with Epidiolex? You know, with some of the wellness kind of things, or not so much?
Yeah, I think they will. But, and again, I'll preface this with, I know enough about the pharma guys to be, you know, I can talk about them a little bit, but I don't, and that's not my world. And yeah, so here's what I would say. My understanding is they look for a patentable compound, like something that's a pure compound of some kind, or some combination of compounds that they can patent, and they can get their 15 or whatever years of printing money on that thing. And this plant has so many like natural properties that it's not as conducive to that that piece. Now, GW Pharma, which got Epidiolex, you know, through the system, that's an isolate of CBD. So all Epidiolex is super high concentrated CBD in isolate form. Yep. And we all, you know, there's lots of anecdotal evidence that it's been working for people. There's also lots of arguments out there that the full spectrum or broad spectrum using the other cannabinoids with CBD is more effective, but that's not what they patented because they can't, right? So I think the natural products industry, you know, that world is obviously going to all be in this thing. I think certain pharma people will, but I have a picture, which maybe the easiest to be just to show it on my phone, but this is, I love this. I have it in my favorites because just I think what this means. So when I was starting in the space, and I came from Indianapolis before I went to California, the big pharma company there is Eli Lilly. Yep. And this is something we found. Can you guys read that? Mm-hmm. So that is Eli Lilly 1913 tincture of cannabis. Yep. So these guys were in this business a long time ago. They all got out of it, but they have like archives of files about it. So I expect they're going to get into it, but it's going to be different pieces, different slices of it, I think. But good question.
Thank you.
I see the, you know, CPG. I think the drinks companies are obviously going to getting in. Constellation is the biggest example. They put $4 billion plus into Canopy in Canada, and now effectively control it. They put their CFO in there as CEO, and you know they're all in. And I think all the other companies have small teams working on what their entry would look like, but most of them are not taking that kind of a leap yet. But that's coming. So you know, like I said, you know, I think we're in this little moment of arbitrage. I'll go back to my investor pitch. So as I'm talking to family offices, which is where most of the funding is coming from these days, high net worth individuals, family offices, is look, there's an arbitrage between right now and when federal prohibition ends and when the FDA clears up their rulings. And now's the time to get in. If you can get in with a platform that's, you know, has scale and momentum, you're going to be in a great position, because the big guys are going to come in and they don't start up from scratch. They buy stuff. So at the very least, we're a target, if not a direct competitor to all these guys, right? But look, it's fun. And by the way, I would say this, just for those considering entering it or thinking about getting, it's still early days. There's a lot of innovation to come. There's lots of folks that, quote, are the leaders today. There's folks that were the leaders 2 years ago, they're gone. There's leaders today that are going to be gone in 2 years. It's a shifting environment. And so I would just say that, like, it's not, it's not at all too late to get into the space, but I would do it with more intelligence than you would have had to do it maybe 2 years ago or 3 years ago. You have to be capitalized. You have the right team. You have to be conscious of what you're going into, and which part of the industry you can get into. But anyone that thinks that, like, oh, that ship sailed, we missed the boat, all the Canadians won, give me a break. That's not even close to being true. Just like there's still brand innovation happening right now in mature industries that, are disrupting Coca-Cola and disrupting Diageo. And, that's why they keep going and buying these young brands, because there's things they haven't thought of and they won't think of. And I think this space is still pretty wide open. So I would say, come on in. It's not for the meek, but there's lots of opportunity.
Maybe room for one last quick one.
Yeah, sure. No, there's no bear. You can ask anything.
Well, I've got one, and I know that I only know this because your brother was working on it. I know that he was working on a lot of looking at byproducts, various byproducts of just the physical fibers and so forth. Do you see that as another revenue stream for where you're going?
I see that as a hugely interesting and potentially large scale industry. It was a giant industry in the U.S. back before Prohibition. And you think about, like, why would they prohibit that stuff? It made no sense. But Hearst, who had the magazines and publishing, they also had paper mills, and they were competing with the hemp was competing with the paper mills, because you can grow hemp every year and make basically hemp paper. And I think pulpwood, maybe someone on the call knows, but something like 20 years of growing to harvest it. It's longer for sure. So, like, there's huge benefit to it. In Europe, they've got a much more developed industry of manufacturing using hemp. We don't have the infrastructure yet. And one of the things that Clay found, and that I recognize, is, like, you got to pick your spots and your timing. Like, it's like the East Guy case. You guys should all read the East Guy case. That was my .com. I raised $60 million for that. Eric got, we did a case study at Dartmouth with that. And, there's nothing in that isn't right today. The only thing wrong with that was I had bars and liquor stores ordering on AOL dial-up in 1999. And I had a Nokia little phone. I have a picture of it with, like, the ordering pad on the little Nokia thing. So it was way too early from an infrastructure standpoint. But there's now companies that are starting to do what I set out to do. And literally their business plan looks like mine, except with new technology. I had to buy like $20 million of servers. You would never do that today. You just, you pay a monthly fee to AWS or whatever, right? Like, you wouldn't build a data room or data server room. So I look at it the same way. And it's like the infrastructure is huge and it's going to come, but you got to pick your spot and timing. And I think, that side of it's going to be giant, but I can only take on so many battles at once. So I'm doing more the brands with the extracts, and I'd love to get into the other side of it, but it's not something that we have the bandwidth for today.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, Smoke, it's sure been fun, and certainly next time I hope it's next to a real fire and maybe with a glass of red wine or something like that. But you've been such a great friend to me and to many of the folks here today, and to the school, lots of colleagues over the years and alumni, and we're just so grateful, and grateful that you spent some time with us today. and thankful for the group that showed up. Great group of students. And I see Alice Pearson, another longtime board member. Thank you for joining us, Alice. And hope you have a great week and a great holiday.
Thank you, Eric. And thank you everyone for joining. And feel free to reach out to me. You can connect on LinkedIn or whatever. The school has my email. And I see a couple of people sent me notes. I'll try to capture those before I get off here, but feel free to reach out. And if I can be helpful, I will try to do so.